You're listening to Protecting What Matters, a podcast by the Ohio Department of Commerce. Commerce is Ohio's chief regulator, and we play a vital role in keeping you safe by protecting your property, your money, and some of the products you use every day. This podcast is designed to bring awareness to important issues and help educate consumers and businesses. Join us as we chat with trusted industry experts focused on providing you with the tools you need to help you protect what matters most in your life.
The fire departments across the U.S. responded to an average of about 4,000 structure fires in dorms, in fraternity houses, sororities, anything along those lines on a college campus, as it were. And they caused about 29 injuries and $11 million in damage every year. And so that's why we're talking about this today. And we have the peak months are September and October is when they start going into the dorms and they're finally starting to get adjusted. And that's when we see the most of these types of fires and that kind of damage that happens.
This is Protecting What Matters, a podcast from the Ohio Department of Commerce. I'm your host, Andy Ellinger, and joining me today is Ken Clauda, the Bureau Chief of the State Fire Marshal's Fire Prevention Bureau. How are you doing today, Ken?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. September is National Campus Safety Month, and the Ohio Department of Commerce and the State Fire Marshal are protecting what matters most at colleges and universities by sharing some information about what to look for when you're selecting on and off campus housing or when you're moving in, that sort of thing. Some other great tips we're going to go over today. What should we start off with today, Ken?
So what we're starting off with today, we'll just kind of talk about why it's important in the National Campus Safety Month and what's going on there. What we have is because they found that from about 2015 on, moving forward, the fire departments across the U.S. responded to an average of about 4,000 structure fires in dorms, in fraternity houses, sororities, anything along those lines on a college campus, as it were. And they caused about 29 injuries and $11 million in damage every year. And so that's why we're talking about this today. And we have the peak months are September and October is when they start going into the dorms and they're finally starting to get adjusted. And that's when we see the most of these types of fires and that kind of damage that happens.
Yeah, so they get in there, they're not aware of these fire safety items to look for, and that's why the surge in September and October.
Right, it's when they're coming up on something that's new, it's a different place, they haven't been there before, and they see there's the injuries and the damages that occur because they're not used to their surroundings. Okay,
let's talk about something we all deal with all of our mobile devices, and that's cords, plugging them in, charging them. They're going to be plugged in throughout on or off campus housing. What should they be aware of in this situation?
So with this, and we're talking about the electrical cords, this could go for any kind of appliance really, is you're going to make sure you're plugging those things in directly into a wall. If you're using something else like an extension cord and then you got a multi-plug adapter and all these different devices that go into it, what you're doing is causing a lot of extra heat and a lot of extra friction on those lines. And that's going to be an issue where you could potentially have a fire. When you're talking about a electrical cord for a phone specifically, these are things that most of the time people plug them in, they're either right next to their bed or on their bed, and you could potentially overheat the phone if you leave it plugged in on your bed where you might get it covered by a blanket or a pillow or anything like that.
And I believe I am guilty of that myself, so I'm taking notes here to make sure that I don't overcharge my phone. A critical piece that you might think is taken care of by your landlord or by the university would be functioning smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. Mm-hmm. What should they be aware of when they look for those?
So when you're moving into an on-campus housing, usually there's a lot of interconnected alarms there. And there's a lot of things from sprinkler systems to fire alarms, smoke alarms themselves, there's a whole laundry list that they have already in place in the dormitories, especially anything that's newer, and I mean newer within 20 years is when they really started putting those things in. But if you are moving into an off-campus housing and you go into a house that's converted into something like an apartment where you have your own room and then you've got common area for your living area, kitchen area, whatever the case may be, you want to make sure you have your smoke alarms in your room, outside of where you sleep, and on each level of that house or the apartment building. For those, if they're not interconnected, make sure those batteries are changed. We'd like to see that changed like at least twice a year. And what I mean by that is the interconnected ones, you'll still change the batteries, but the alarms themselves are kind of just a standalone alarm, and you want to make sure you're paying attention to those. And then the other thing to think about with that is your alarm itself has a replacement date, and you want to make sure that those alarms are less than 10 years old. And the best way of being able to do that is just pull one down off of the ceiling, take a look at the back of it. Usually has a date when it was manufactured. If it's greater than 10 years, we're going to need to replace that entire alarm. And if you're doing something where you're renting, you're going to contact your landlord to get them to take care of that, because that's part of the agreement that usually is in place.
Another item that seems to prop up in these when these fires happen on campuses and off-campus housing is unattended cooking fires and some other cooking-related things that happen because maybe the students are on their own for the first time and doing. Is that why this happens? And what can they take home and understand so this doesn't happen?
So that's exactly it too. About 9 out of 10 of the fires that we have on campus where they're able to have their own area to cook, that's what's causing these fires. 9 out of 10 of our fires that we're seeing are cooking related fires.
That's a lot.
That's a high number of fires there. And you hit it. Most of the time these are students that are out on their own for the first time. They don't have anybody else, a parent or family member to keep an eye on what's happening, and they're doing things on their own. So just like it is for us when we're in our own homes, is to just make sure you're paying attention when you cook. Make sure you stay with the items that you're cooking. Don't leave. Don't go and walk out of the room while you're making yourselves your dinner. It's funny, we joke about it, but popcorn is one of the things that tend to be an issue. We laugh about it because when you put a microwave on and you've got a common area, you hit the buttons on the microwave, you walk away, well, you just walked away from cooking. I mean, it's as simple as that. You weren't there to know that your popcorn was about done and to be able to open up the microwave. So it's the same kind of idea. You just want to make sure you're always staying with whatever it is you're cooking. Don't go ahead and start cooking if you're sleepy. Don't cook if you're impaired by anything at all, drugs, alcohol, or otherwise. Stay with what you're cooking. Don't leave. And then finish the process. Make sure you have your meal ready to go, and make sure you turn off everything that's warm. Shut off that stove, shut off the oven, and make sure everything is kept clear away from your area where you're cooking.
I would imagine, I know we talked about it on an earlier episode about grilling safety, but when it's nice out and you're in your off-campus housing and it's time to drag this grill out, things can go awry. So those tips probably are still relevant for students as well.
It's the same idea. Like I said, across the board. I mean, you're now in a home. You're in something else that's now yours to take care of. If you're going to be grilling outside, follow the same kind of safety tips we offered earlier with the grilling, and if you're using charcoal or a gas grill, making sure you're keeping yourself safe and following all the different recommendations that they have for those.
I know we've hit on the big areas. I've heard mentioned that candles cause a significant amount of. I don't know if is there tips for candle usage or just don't ever use them is the best course of action.
Honestly, don't use candles. And I joke about that because I know people love to have their candles, and I understand.
They smell lovely.
They do smell great, but the open flame is the biggest issue with those, right? Nowadays, we have wax warmers that are out there that are controlled by a light source or a heat source of its own kind, and it's not going to be an open flame, and you'll still get that nice smell from whatever scent you have there. So recommend that. But if you do want to use candles, just like everything else, make sure you're paying attention. You don't leave the room if the candles are burning. If you have a pet, make for sure that you don't leave. I mean, you're going to have probably roommates with you if you're in a different setting where you've got your own apartment. You're going to want to make sure you're not having things going on where there's potential somebody else could knock over your candle and cause a fire. So just always being aware of your surroundings, what's happening. Keep that candle away from anything that else could burn. Make sure that you're not doing the lighting of the candle near something like a curtain or a blanket or anything like that. But yeah, honestly, the best recommendation is don't. But you know, that's what you gotta. If you want to use them, these are ways to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, that's good advice. Now, it seems college students don't smoke like they used to, but smoking continues to be a cause of fatalities throughout Ohio. Mm-hmm. So we'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention the dangers of smoking.
Right. You did mention that. It seems to be a trend where the younger generation, they're using vape pens more than an actual item that burns, right? The vape pens have their own causes for concern with charging them if you have a rechargeable. Yeah. Similar concept with a cell phone. You know, make sure there's no frayed wiring. Make sure that you're charging it and you know that it's charging. If you feel like it's hot, it's probably something wrong with the battery that's inside of that vape pen, and it could cause an issue to burn wherever it is at that time. But for cigarettes themselves, just like everything else we talk about for cigarettes, you know, smoke, if you're going to, smoke outside. In most places, if you're living in a off campus, there's usually some provisions there that you're not allowed to smoke inside anyway. But make sure if you are smoking, you do it outside. You have an approved ashtray of some kind to be able to put the cigarette butts in. Don't just flick them into the mulch. And just practice as much safety as you can there as well. And if you do have the ability to smoke and you do it inside, make sure you're not sleepy. Again, it sounds funny when I keep coming back to this, but making sure you are alert and able to handle what you're doing at that exact time is what's going to be able to keep you as safe as you possibly can be.
Now, I think we've touched on them all, but we might have missed some. Are there some things we need to look for, maybe on-campus housing, dorms versus off-campus, that maybe could be a cause for safety issues?
Well, for all of them, make sure you have an escape plan, right?
Oh, fantastic, yes.
You're going to want to make sure you know at least 2 ways out of every room of where you're at. That is going to be an imperative thing to when the smoke alarm sounds, or if you have a fire alarm activate, you get out, you stay out, and you don't go back in. And that's an important thing. But having that escape plan and knowing what to do if those alarms sound, and let's be honest, if you're in a dorm room, chances are it's going to sound at least once while you're there for any given year, whether or not it's a real incident or not. We always want to treat them like they are. And we don't want to get complacent when that alarm sounds to go, oh, it's yet another fire alarm sounding. No, you need to get out of your place that you're at, stay out of the area, and wait for the fire department to come to give the all clear to go back in. So having that escape plan and practicing that, and at least having the knowledge of what's going on, with making sure that if you have the ability to get out of a window, if that's something that's available to you, make sure you know how to do that. If you live in an off-campus housing that was like a house turned into an apartment, maybe invest in an escape ladder. They make up to 3-story escape ladders. That way, if something happens and you can't get out of your room, you know what to do to be able to get out. The other thing, you know, we'd be remiss not to talk about close before you doze. That's an important thing that's out there that a lot of people do not take advantage of.
There's a huge difference between the heat of the fire with a closed door versus an open door.
That
correct?
Is exactly right, yeah.
And you're what, preventing the oxygen from feeding that? Is that?
So that's twofold. So you're not allowing that heat to get in to your room, because if you close your door, if the fire is on the outside of your door and where you're sleeping, you get about a 900-degree difference on temperature right there.
That's
fire
huge.
burns about 1,000 degrees, and you know, your room, even if with your door closed, it'll be warm, but it's only going to be about 100 degrees. So that's going to make it very livable for you. The other part of it is how much carbon monoxide is going to be out there. And carbon monoxide is a thing that, unfortunately, that's what really kills people, because you and I can't breathe in carbon monoxide.
No.
So that takes that down from levels that are not able to be breathed in by us to stuff that's down low enough that we can handle that. Oh yeah, you're going to cough a little bit, but you'll still be able to survive. So those are the things to making sure that when you do go to bed at night, you close that door wherever you are. If it's in a dorm room, if it's in an apartment, if it's in a house, you close that bedroom door to make sure you're keeping yourself safe.
And yeah, if you close the door, that'll buy you the time you need with the second way out to get to safety.
Absolutely.
So it's imperative that you do so.
Yes.
We're talking about all this because it's National Campus Safety Month, and as Ken alluded to earlier, September and October are the peak months for fires on campus and off campus. Is there anything else we should touch on before we close?
I think we've hit pretty much all the things that are going on there. I think we've gone over the different things to help. I mean, we've got our information provided on our website, so people can find it there through the Fire Marshal's website. We have safety tips on college students. We got safety tips for cooking safety, all the different things that we talked about today. So I think we've done what we needed to do to get this message out there.
Thanks, Ken, for joining me. This has been an episode of Protecting What Matters.